Lula is supposed to meet with Alcolumbre this Tuesday at the Alvorada, so at least this week they're voting on something. And Lula is interested in some issues that are stalled in the Senate. So this meeting will be precisely for him to discuss with Alcolumbre what can be moved forward. There's the end of the 6 days on, 1 day off work schedule. There's the public security constitutional amendment, and there's the provisional measure to end the tax on cheap clothes, which is about to expire, so they have to vote soon, otherwise the tax will come back. The tax was eliminated by the provisional measure, but if they don't vote on it, it will be charged again, right? And then that's going to cause a lot of trouble. So Davi Alcolumbre is going to meet with Lula for this meeting, so maybe they can come to an understanding. That's why I put on the cover that love is back, because it seems like it is. Alcolumbre, at this moment, is very interested in Lula. He's going after him, he's proposing things. Anyway, you can't trust him 100%, especially Davi Alcolumbre, right? On the contrary, you have to be suspicious all the time. But what's going on, right? So it could be that some of these agenda items that are important for the government might move forward in these meetings between Lula and Alcolumbre. There was a first meeting that took place at Alexandre de Moraes' house. Now, this is the second meeting, and there will probably be more meetings between them. What does Lula mainly want? First, to make sure that the tax on cheap clothes doesn't come back, that the provisional measure doesn't expire. That's the #1 priority, because it's about to expire. There are only a few days left. Priority #2 is the end of the 6 days on, 1 day off work schedule. Priority #3 is the public security constitutional amendment. It's been stalled for a long time. If it stays stalled longer, it doesn't really matter. But the amendment to end the 6 days on, 1 day off work schedule is also an important priority for the government. Especially so that it happens before the elections. And that's where it gets harder, right? Making sure this will be voted on before the elections, because Alcolumbre isn't interested, right? He doesn't want to vote, and we know how these things go. Alcolumbre signals to Lula and moves forward with ending the tax on cheap clothes. So Alcolumbre is showing goodwill to Lula. He already said, look, let's vote. I created the joint committee because the provisional measure has to be reviewed by a committee before being voted on. So what did Alcolumbre do? He already set up the committee. And it will be set up tomorrow, this Wednesday. Maybe, if you're watching the replay of this live stream, the joint committee might already be set up, right? That will review the provisional measure, because you remember, first, the National Congress approved the return of the Blusinhas tax. Well, not the return, right? The implementation of the Blusinhas tax, which is the tax on imports under $50, which became known as the Blusinhas tax because people buy blouses from China. But actually, it's for any product sold there or sold anywhere in the world. And that costs less than $50, right? So they put the tax in place. Then, Lula was left alone with the blame. Everyone kept criticizing because Lula was taxing others. But it wasn't even Lula. It was the National Congress that approved it unanimously. So Lula wasn't going to veto something that was approved unanimously in the National Congress, right? Right. But he was left to take the blame alone. And then everyone, Mara, thanks for the gift. Everyone was criticizing Lula there. Then Lula said, no, wait a minute. I'm not going to take this on alone, no. I'm going to end this tax. He went there and issued a provisional measure. He ended the Blusinhas tax, right? But it has 90 days to be voted on. 45 in the House, 45 in the Senate, something like that. If it's not voted on, it expires. And when it expires, the law is no longer valid. And a provisional measure is a law that takes effect immediately. Once it's published, it's in effect. But if it expires, it loses its effect. So if it expires, the Blusinhas tax comes back. And then Alcolumbre is already like, no. Let's vote, let's do our part here and all that. In other words, he's trying to make a gesture of goodwill to Lula to try to get closer. Anyway, there are several people saying here, I don't trust Alcolumbre. I don't trust Alcolumbre either. The United States warns that its dominance over Latin America will never be questioned again. This is an article by Jamil Chad from UOL. Trump, the United States government, posted a 5-minute video on social media. Of course, I'm not going to show the video here. First, the video is in English, and second, it's 5 minutes long. Nobody can stand that, right? Anyway. In which they distort the Monroe Doctrine. The Monroe Doctrine was the doctrine adopted by the President of the United States that stated that Latin America belonged to the United States, right? They were in charge. Because they wanted to prevent recolonization by the European countries that had lost their colonies here in South America. The excuse was, let's prevent them from coming back and taking the territory again. That was the excuse. And what was the truth? The truth is that they really wanted to dominate the territory, to control and have influence over the whole territory, right? Across the Americas from north to south, right? And so in this situation, beautiful, I'm fine. Thank you too. Beautiful for the gift, dear. And now in this situation, they've created the Dunrow Doctrine, which is a mix of Monroe and the D from Donald Trump, right? And so this Dunrow Doctrine means, again, to reestablish dominance. The dominance of the United States in South America, Central America, the Caribbean, and North America. When we talk about North America, mainly Mexico and Canada, right? Everyone would be submissive to the United States. And then they put all of this together. Look, Ricardo Melo, there's Ricardo Melo here too, guys. Send greetings to Porto de Galinhas. Greetings to Porto de Galinhas, my friend, Ricardo Melo, my namesake. Great to have you here, my friend. Stay around, okay? There won't be any confusion about that, right? Everyone thinks it's me talking, but it's not me. It's Ricardo Melo, Melo 2371. Look at that. Ricardo is Amy Winehouse, nailed it. Professor Maria Lucia, that's her. I love Amy Winehouse, and she's right here on my t-shirt. Another one of the t-shirts that Ricardo wears, which are t-shirts that always draw attention. That's part of it, just like Lula's hat is a part of him these days. My t-shirts are also a part of what we do here, which is important, right? Anyway. And then the United States released this video, right? Clearly threatening everyone in the Americas. Anyway, everyone in the Americas. Speaking of Trump, look at this story, man. Unbelievable. Trump was hidden in an airport service truck to switch planes because of a threat from Iran, according to reports. Trump was in Turkey. This was a month ago already, but it was just released now. But still, it's curious to say the least. Trump was in Turkey attending a NATO summit. When it was time to leave, they found out the United States Secret Service discovered there was a bomb threat from Iran. They were going to throw a bomb at the plane. On Air Force One, which is the U.S. Air Force plane that carries the President of the United States. But every time the President travels, two planes travel, the one he is on and a support plane. Ana Rosa Costa, thank you, dear, for the gift. Yeah, the support plane goes along too. So what did Trump do? Take a look here. There's a video, guys. It's amazing. Trump got on the plane. You see the image, right? He got on the plane as usual, facing the cameras, everyone filming. When he got up there, he waved goodbye, right? You'll see, look, he's getting there. It looks like he's just boarding the plane to leave, right? Look, he stops, gets to the door, looks back, gives that traditional wave, says goodbye. Thanks, everyone. I'm out. He got on the plane, and then see that truck underneath? That truck pulls up. It's a truck that loads and delivers food to the planes, those catering services, right? And then the truck stopped right under the plane. And Trump got out on the other side. Nobody saw him, and he got into that truck. And he was transported to another aircraft, which was also a United States Air Force aircraft. Thank you, Edna, for the gift. And then he was put on this other plane without anyone knowing. See over there, there's even a little spot to show the truck leaving. Look. Taking Donald Trump to another plane, right? And then, what's even more unbelievable, the plane took off full of people. There was a threat that they were going to bomb the plane. Then they took Trump off the plane and let the plane take off, full of people. Later, he showed up in the United Kingdom, showed up on another plane, right? Then he showed up again, getting off, pretending he had been on the plane the whole time. This story was reported by the Washington Post, one of the most important newspapers in the United States, right? So you can see the craziness of Donald Trump. What a story. The most unbelievable part is right here. Look. Here, see this. This image here, which also has a little circle. Look, these people here, this little group here, see the mouse here. So these people are journalists who cover the White House and White House staff as well. They boarded the plane. So if they had to bring down the plane, if there was a plan to attack the United States plane, a lot of people would have died, and they let it go. The plane took off and left with a lot of people inside. So if they were going to bring down the plane, a lot of people would have died, especially who? The poor journalists. Journalists suffer, right? Honestly, journalists suffer. Even at times like this, journalists suffer. They really do. And then, this is Donald Trump's latest craziness. A secret plan to get the guy off the plane, but leave the plane full of people so that eventually they might end up dying if it were really a true attack. It's unbelievable.